For this week's Mozart challenge, you can listen to the Symphony number 40, Movement 1. And I've sent the link in your lesson notes, so you can listen to that. It's just around 8 minutes long, I think. And then either while you're listening or after you listen, you can circle the classical characteristics that you hear in the piece. So I'm just going to run through each of these terms. You don't necessarily have to get them all right necessarily, but I do want you to be able to defend your answers and, kind of convince me of a good reason of why you chose what you did. So the first word is called absolute, or first term, I should say, is absolute music. And that's a common classical characteristic. It means that the music itself is not about anything other than music. So if you have the challenge sheet already printed, you can write next to that just the music. So a good example of not absolute music would be any pop music today. It has words, it tells a story, or it's about a theme. Or any even piano music that has a theme, like Auld Lang Syne is about old friends. Let's see, what would be another one? Even Alla Turca, if we look at the title, it kind of implies that it's supposed to be based off of kind of a Turkish theme. So that's kind of like about, you might say it's about the Turks, or you might argue it's just based off their music, in which case it's just the music. So that one's kind of borderline. A lot of piano music, though, has imaginative titles, in which case it is not absolute music because it is meant to be descriptive. If the music has a title like Minuet number 1, that's a good indication it's absolute music. Homophony, so that if we break that word down, there's two elements. So it's the homo and then phony. So homo is a prefix that means same. So, and then phony is sound like telephone. So same sound. So generally that means melody and chords. So another type of sound would be like two melodies playing at the same time. That's called polyphony, because many sounds. So for example, if you hear something like that would be more polyphony, lots of melodies going on at once. Homophony would be more so if you hear melody and then you hear kind of supportive harmonies, then that would be homophony, melody and chords. Contrast, you're probably familiar with contrast in everyday life. So generally you can define it as kind of like having two opposites standing side by side and they contrast each other. So you can just write opposites as a way to jog your memory if you like. So in music, you can think of musical opposites: high, low, low, high, low, high, soft, loud, fast, slow. That's the one I was trying to say. Fast, slow, major, minor, even just like having a single instrument and then having many instruments. Lots of different ways you could have contrast. Clear melody. Is it singable? That's always a good indication if it has a clear melody. So sometimes melodies are not the least bit singable. So something like that's not singable. So that would not be a clear melody. However, something like that is a clear melody. You can sing that. Elegant. Is it kind of fancy sounding? Does it sound like something you could do for, like, I don't know, a fancy party? Then it's elegant. Question and answer phrases. This one's probably my favorite one because we're actually going to be getting into this more for your next challenge, week 7. But a question phrase is something that is like a short musical phrase. In other words, it has a beginning and an ending. In other words, the ending has some kind of place of rest, even if it's brief. And it doesn't sound quite finished, though, for the question. So it's a musical phrase. It has kind of a temporary ending, but it doesn't sound finished. And then an answer is going to come after the question. And the answer kind of completes the question. And it can either have pretty much exactly the same note. So here's an example where the answer and the question are almost identical. So this is Beethoven's Ode to Joy. So there's the question, ends not in a satisfying way. And that's your answer, which sounds much more finished. Ends on a place of rest. So the first example, Twinkle, Twinkle, the question and the answer are different from each other. And Ode to Joy, the answer and the question are pretty much the same as each other. just the ending changes. So for this, you can write, so the question ends open and the answer ends closed. You could also use unfinished versus finished, or even like incomplete versus complete, whatever, works for you. So just kind of listening for short musical phrase that has an ending, doesn't sound finished, and then followed by a second musical phrase with an ending that does sound more finished. All right, so as you're listening to the song, just as you hear the element, just go ahead and circle it and then show me your answers next week.